Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and accomplished professional from Brisbane, Australia, Paul Winnister. Paul, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ashutosh. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you. Paul is a leadership expert, a coach, a trainer, and a speaker. So, Paul, before we get into leadership, tell me about your journey and how have your experiences in both the military and corporate sectors shaped your approach to navigating complexity in leadership?
Yes, certainly. And as you've said, I have experience from the military and then more recently in the corporate world. After my university degree, I did a degree in politics. I decided to join the Air Force. I was based in the United Kingdom, so I joined the Royal Air Force in the UK, and launched a 15-year career operating all over the world. Joined at a very, very interesting time. I remember my very first flight, once I'd been through flying training, was accepted onto my flying squadron. My very first flight I had on my operational squadron. After I landed, there was a strange atmosphere in the air. Everybody was very quiet. And I said to one of the engineers who greeted the aircraft, like, this is strange, what's going on? And he said, oh, have you not seen the news? I went, no, I've been in the air. And he said, oh, 2 aircraft have flown into the Twin Towers in New York.
Wow.
And I just remember thinking, wow, I thought I was joining the military and had a certain expectation. And I just remember having that feeling of, I have no idea what the future is going to hold. You know, it was quite a frightening sensation, as I'm sure it was for many people being exposed to that. But I just remember thinking, this was my new career. And now it's going to potentially turn out to be radically different to what I thought it was going to be. So a lot of time, supporting UK, NATO forces across the world, either, in Afghanistan and Iraq, but also in plenty of other places, spent a lot of time in Africa. Intermixed with my time in the cockpit, because I was a pilot. I was a C-130 pilot. So we flew, did a lot of missions with like paratroopers and special forces, and also aid supplies and resupply of troops on the ground. So that was what I spent most of my time doing in the air. I also did a number of roles where I was on the ground doing planning and strategy and coordinating activity. And so when I came to the end of my career, as much as I enjoyed flying, as much as I enjoyed being a pilot, I actually found I preferred the kind of the planning and the strategy roles. So I actually then looked to transition and step away from the cockpit, and looked at a number of corporate organizations in London. And so I ended up joining Goldman Sachs very briefly, and then ended up going to Barclays Bank. And then since then, I've worked in London and Australia on big corporate transformation programs, mergers, acquisitions, divestments.
So let's talk a little bit about leadership now, Paul. And when I was reading about you, I was interested to read this term transformational leadership. So I wanted to ask you, how do you define transformational leadership, and why is it critical today?
Yes. Well, there's a number of different leadership philosophies whereby how you behave and act as a leader really drives successful outcomes for the team, right? And certain number of those philosophies are applicable in certain situations. You have the more autocratic style of leadership, which by and large does not work as a motivator. However, it does work in certain situations in a highly chaotic environment. And this sometimes applies in the military as well. On the front line of a battlefield, when it's chaos, you sometimes have to have that autocratic style of leadership, or sometimes in a very command and control structured organization. And this is very, very basic stuff, like perhaps in a factory or something like that, where autocratic styles of leadership can have a certain degree of effectiveness. But by and large, those scenarios are very rare. And actually, you need to start moving across towards the more empathetic styles of leadership. And other styles of leadership, laissez-faire leadership, is taking a step back. But actually, transformational leadership, particularly where I operate, which is transforming businesses, so there is obviously synergy there, is actually very highly appropriate to operating in complex, complicated working environments, which many of us work in, right? If you work in IT, if you work in professional services, if you work in almost any corporate role, you're working in a highly complex environment where the landscape is highly ambiguous. Things are moving all the time. Some of the goals are uncertain. Some of the market that you're operating with can be highly uncertain. And so actually taking that transformation approach, which is really very much based around a growth mindset, an open mindset of let's focus on positives for the organization, but also positives for the people. Let's make sure that the people we're working with are actually, and the people on our team are actually contributing in a way that is good for them and good for the organization. So very much focused on both people and outcomes.
Well said. And what would you say are some of the key ingredients in transforming teams into high performance entities?
Yes, and often, so I will go into organizations now so while I've been working in the last 10 years as a as a program director leading transformation programs for organizations, now I'm operating more as a coach, consultant, advisor, trainer, speaker, and I find that teams are often inhibited by poor leadership. And actually, so leadership is really the key to unlocking the potential of the team.
Right.
Through good intentions of the leader, right? It's not, sometimes the leaders are trying their best. As I've said, it's very challenging environment we're operating in. They find that, the information is unclear. They find that they're working long hours. They're overwhelmed. The targets keep moving. Their to-do list is getting ever longer. But as a result of that, some leaders will have a tendency to apply more control. They will try to control more things, when actually what the reverse is true. In order to create success, they actually need to step back and empower, delegate, motivate their team, use their team for them, distribute the to-do list and delegate as much as they can without micromanaging. And that's really the secret ingredient to make sure that when you're operating in a highly complex environment, many leaders make the mistake of trying to cut through the confusion and trying to cut through the complexity by just doing everything themselves. They have to make the decision. They have to define the strategy. They have to define the plan. When you often have a room of highly smart people around you who have great ideas themselves. So you do not have a monopoly on good ideas as a leader.
Very interesting. And Paul, what in your view are the mindset shifts that are necessary for leaders to thrive in today's fast-paced and ambiguous environments?
Yes, certainly. I think there are a number of mindset shifts that really help. And one obviously is about, as I just mentioned, is around control, understanding that you cannot control everything, right? We are complex, organic creatures with, who spent thousands and thousands of years of our existence as human beings living a very primitive lifestyle. Our bodies and our brains have adapted in a certain way to have evolved in order to respond to that environment. The environment we face today is unlike anything we've ever known. You cannot control everything. If we lived 50,000 years ago, then there are things we could provide control over. That is not the case now. You can't control everything. So that's the first mindset. Second one is actually about failure. We have to recognize that in this complex landscape, things will fail. And so people have to get much more comfortable with failure. If you're comfortable with failure, you'll be comfortable to delegate. You'll be comfortable with without micromanaging, because if people make mistakes, that's okay. We're all human. We all make mistakes. And also, you'll be comfortable in an environment where you can take calculated risks. When things are complex, when things are fast moving, people become very reluctant to take risks. They actually try to almost become static because they fear that if they do something, it will be the wrong decision. Well, actually, you can't be static. You have to keep moving. You have to make decisions and recognize that sometimes the decision is the wrong decision, but that's okay. As long as you have a contingency plan in place to try to predict potential worst case scenarios and then deal with it accordingly.
Well said. Well said. My next question is on, for leaders, how do you believe leadership styles impact a leader's health and well-being?
Yeah, I mean, this is key as well. I think many new leaders take on too much of the burden themselves, and even experienced leaders will try to take on too much of the burden to know everything, be in control of everything, have everything under, everything on their to-do list ticked off as soon as they get it. And that is just a recipe for overwhelm and sleepless nights, right? So having trying to adopt a mindset shift that is more comfortable with fluidity and more comfortable with a degree of complexity that you're never going to be 100% on top of, actually is quite liberating. It enables you to then free up and say, you know what, I'm not 100% in control of this. I trust the people I've asked to do it. I don't have to keep checking in on them. I don't have to micromanage them. And then recognizing that, you're never going to stay on top of your to-do list is part of the battle. And obviously delegating that to-do list, but then, you can find that it frees up some of your time. You can then focus. The more you delegate, the more you can focus on the big picture things that as a leader you need to be focusing on: the strategy, the planning, the formulation, the resource management, the pastoral care of your people. Looking after your people is your number one priority as a leader. Those are the things you really be focusing on. And if you find you do focus on that and try to get other people in your team to support you with the actual activities that need to be done as part of the team, then your to-do list will reduce, and actually you'll be able to sleep better at night. Self-care is so key. If you're as the leader, if you're failing, if you're tired, falling over, collapsing, not getting enough sleep, not eating well, not looking after yourself, then that's going to impact the rest of the team.
Well said. Great response. Thank you. My next question is, how do you help leaders develop and communicate a clear vision to their teams?
Yes. And vision's kind of integral, because again, another mistake that some leaders will make is when they're delegating, they'll just pass on what to do without explaining why it's important. The why it's important is absolutely critical. In the military, we have this concept called mission command, and many people think the military is very command and control, and actually it isn't, right? Certainly in the UK military where I came from, it's not command and control based. It's actually mission command based, which is when you delegate a task, explain what you need that person to do, what the parameters are they're operating in, so how much time they have, what resources they have at their disposal, and so on, and why it's important. Because once you've delegated that task, that then empowers that person to be adaptable and make decisions on the spot. So if they come up to an obstacle, they're not constantly having to go back to you as the leader and saying, oh, what about this? What about that? What about that? I was a pilot, right? So when the pilot in charge of an aircraft is given a mission, they have a very thorough brief with either their commander and their team. But once that brief is complete, they're completely empowered to go off and fly that mission. They're not on the radio every 2 minutes to their commander going, oh, what do I do now? What do I do now? They are empowered to make the decisions because they understand not only what is to achieve, but why. And if you know why, then it enables you to adapt the plan accordingly and adjust your approach and make decisions that still achieve the desired outcome.
Well said. And, Paul, with your background in strategy and risk, how do you incorporate risk management into leadership decisions?
Yes. Well, risk is really an integral part of all decision making, and really the entire purpose of organizations is to make sure that they're not only successful generating profits or generating value for shareholders or members or whatever it might be, but also that they're managing the risks accordingly and they're providing appropriate controls over the risks. So yes, there's an entire risk management framework that's absolutely critical to the effective running and operations of organizations. But understanding those risks, understanding the impacts, understanding why they're important, and also being comfortable with taking risks also has to form part of that decision-making process. And again, as leaders, you need to be really cross. You don't have to necessarily be across all of the details, but when your team are reporting into you, you just need to understand what are the risks coming down the track and why does it matter? And what happens if we don't do anything about it, right? So constantly being aware of that risk landscape is absolutely critical, because that then enables you to make effective decisions.
Very interesting. Thank you. And a follow-up question to that would be that what strategies would you recommend for leaders to thrive amidst uncertainty?
Yes, I think uncertainty is inevitable, right? It is a constant part of the business landscape. And so, part of what I say to people is you can't run away from it. You've just got to strap in and enjoy the ride, right? You're on a roller coaster. you either stay on the roller coaster and accept that it's going to go forward, there'll be ups, there'll be downs, there'll be things you don't know, or you get off the roller coaster, right? So I don't think there's really any much choice there. You have to manage uncertainty as part of the landscape. You have to manage it as part of the terrain and be comfortable with it. And everything I talk about is about being comfortable and confident in the environment we're operating in. My background as a pilot, as a combat pilot in the military, was all about, and indeed across the military full stop, is about how do we adjust to the unknowns that are going to present themselves to us. Going into an operational theater, going into an environment where things are complex, things are uncertain, that you constantly have to be adaptable. You constantly have to be thinking your plan and saying, how do I respond to this situation now? How do I respond to this situation now? How do I use the people around me on my team, who are often very smart people, to help me adjust the plan accordingly? So you just have to be being super adaptable, recognizing that it's a constant, that you're not going to get off it. If you're in the world of business, uncertainty is part of the landscape. So strap in and go for it.
Well said. So let's now move from leaders to teams, because along with leaders come their teams. Can you share some techniques for empowering teams to perform at their best?
Yes, and look, I've already talked a bit about delegation, so I think I might take this from a subtly different angle and talk about psychological safety. Psychological safety is something that has been around as a concept for a decade or so now. The actual word started coming into increasingly fruition about 20 years ago, when Amy Edmondson started appearing on the scene and writing about this topic. She wrote a book that came out about 10 years ago called The Fitness Organization, and many people have latched onto this. And there is a lot of language being used around psychological safety that doesn't necessarily align with what the true concept is. The reason I'm a big fan of psychological safety is, yes, it has become popularized in the last 10 years, but my background in aviation as a pilot, and whether you're military or commercial pilot, psychological safety is really drummed into you. We call it subtly different things. It was called crew resource management, which is about using, as I said, using your team, using your crew effectively, and also the concept of just culture, which is actually recognizing that people make mistakes, people get things wrong, but creating an environment where if you do make a mistake, people are comfortable to admit it. They don't feel like they're going to be penalized for making that mistake. Bring all these concepts together, and it kind of forms into this this phrase, psychological safety, which is getting used. It is getting a bit overused. Some people think it's about, creating a safe space where there's no conflict. It's about, it's just about having a nice culture at work. No, it's not about that. It's actually a way to empower the team and get them to take ownership of things. I'll give you an example. Back in the 1970s, there were a number of commercial airliner crashes where, when they listened to the black box recording afterwards, they saw that people, the co-pilot or a junior crew member was raising concerns and saying, I'm not happy with this. I'm not comfortable. Something doesn't feel right. And they were just getting overruled by the captain. The captain was like, shut up. Who are you? I'm the big boss. You don't know anything. I'm in charge. And the aircraft would crash. So pilots have been taught that to really put ego out the window, which is quite ironic for pilots, because they can be a bit of an egotistical bunch. But actually, you kind of have to put ego out of the window, approach things with curiosity and humility, and as a leader, understand that your team is an incredible resource at your disposal. If the leader can apply that approach, then the team are empowered, because they can speak up, they can contribute ideas, they can say, I think this is good, I think this is bad. They can challenge assumptions in an environment where they feel safe to do so. They will be listened to, and not only listened to, that actually acted upon. So if someone says, look, I don't think this is a good idea, actually the leader goes, yeah, you know what? Good call out. I agree with you. In very large organizations today, that sometimes doesn't happen, and I go back to aviation, because Boeing recently have had a number of challenges with their aircraft, the 737 MAX, where engineers have been raising concerns, but they haven't been listened to. And often when you look under the surface of these things, it's often because profits have overridden everything else. And there's cultural rot entirely associated with sales and profits. So but as a principle, just enabling an environment, whatever you call it, whether you call it just culture or psychological safety, enabling an environment where people feel safe to contribute, people feel comfortable speaking up, people know they're going to get listened to, people, if they challenge assumptions, they're not going to get shot down. If they go to their boss and say, you know what, this is a bad idea, it does take courage to do that, but the leader needs to know that that's actually good. It's good that the person's coming up and challenging them or questioning what they're doing.
Well said. So, Paul, I have time for two more questions.
Okay.
My next question is, how do you see the future of leadership evolving, especially given all the technology that is pervading each one of our lives completely?
Oh, wow. That is an interesting question. Yeah, I think in some respects, it's going to make life easier. Like your situational awareness, which is so critical in leadership, is going to improve, right? Because you have more tools, more systems at your disposal in order to stay abreast of what's happening. But the counterpoint to that is it actually becomes harder because we've got so much data. Like, is it something, I can't remember the exact statistics, something like there's been more data created in the last 2 years than in the last 2000. There is now more data than ever before, which makes it incredibly hard for you to understand what's important and what isn't important.
Right.
So I think actually, everything I've been talking about, complexity, uncertainty, is going to get worse. It's going to be even more complex in future because we're going to be working with more and more data points. And even though the irony is that your situational awareness will improve because you've got technology at your disposal to help you, make decisions, visualize data, whatever it will be, the counterbalance to that is the increasing amount of data is going to make it hard. So uncertainty and complexity is just going to get worse. There may be technologies we don't know about. AI is obviously new and exciting, and there's lots of opportunities there that will help us maybe manage that. But, I think that's going to be the key challenge for us in the future.
Great response. Thank you. And my last question to you, Paul, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. Given your amazing background as an aircraft pilot, corporate world leader, leadership expert, coach, advisor, trainer, speaker, what would you say are 3 lessons you would want a lot of our viewers and listeners to take back from your life and your journey?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think when people are new managers, new leaders, they've been newly promoted, it's very easy to feel a degree of imposter syndrome. It's very easy to feel like, I'm not as knowledgeable as other people. Why have I been promoted? I'm not comfortable in this role. And because people may feel that way, my top tips are, don't make the mistakes of trying to overcompensate. So what managers will do when they are put in this position is do 3 things, right? So they'll try to overcompensate by trying too hard, right? They'll try to prove themselves. I need to really show everyone that you've made the right decision to promote me.
Correct.
So they'll do like not delegating, trying to do everything themselves, not seeking feedback, working really long hours. So they burn themselves out, like big mistake. The other thing they'll try to do is, again, as I mentioned earlier, be scared of failure because they feel like it's going to reflect on them. They will look bad. People will start questioning why they've been promoted if people on the team fail. Failure is a fact of life. Failure, if you don't make progress in life without failure, and you need to accept that people will make mistakes in your team. People will get things wrong. You need to protect your team when they make mistakes and make sure that blame isn't apportioned, but at the same time own the failure and try to learn lessons from it as quickly as possible. The great thing with failure is it's a wonderful opportunity to learn lessons.
Correct.
And I think the third one is people sometimes think that they're over communicating. You can never over communicate. When you're in charge, you just have to make sure everybody is totally clear on the vision, the context, the why, the objective. You can't over communicate that enough. When you're working with stakeholders across the organization, keeping to reinforce those messages of what you're doing and why you're doing it is absolutely key. So there's no such thing as over communication.
Fascinating. And on that note, Paul, and your 3 wonderful lessons: don't make mistakes by trying to overcompensate, keep delegating, keep getting feedback and giving feedback. Second, you said, but don't be scared of failure. And the third one
Yes.
you said was communicate, communicate, communicate. Don't be scared of
Correct.
over communicating. Thank you,
Yes.
Paul, for speaking to me about your own amazing journey. I think some of your stories about the aircrafts and everything that you've done is so fascinating. Thank you for speaking to me about so many different aspects of transformational leadership and of leadership in general. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.